Commissioner, everyone's here. You can begin if you'd like.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. Good evening, everybody. Happy New Year and welcome to 2023. My 2023 is beginning with a little technical issue this evening. Very used to running Teams and even Zoom on my laptop. My laptop has chosen not to participate this evening, so you're getting me via phone. And the speaker wasn't working on the phone, so I'm using headphones, but the microphone on that is not working. So we're going to do our best. Hopefully you can hear me. I see some nodding. That's a good sign. Staff are set up to hear me maybe a little better. So if I'm dropping some words, they can help me reiterate, or we'll make sure we get there. In any case, I'm Jordan Sheff. I see some familiar names and a few familiar faces on my very small phone screen. And I'm happy to be with you once again for those who I've met. And for those of you I haven't, welcome to a discussion with the commissioner at DDS.
I don't
looking forward.
organize Barb, so but that's good. If she's here, let's have her.
Jordan, you're commissioner, you're muted.
I think I got hit by the, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So Joe was doing me a favor and muting all and muted me and then unmuted me. So we're back now. Joe, do you want to do any housekeeping on muting, unmuting, and how people from their phones can participate later in the evening? Or do you want to do that after my intro?
Yeah, I'm happy to do a quick note. I asked that my colleague Kevin Bronson mention anything I might forget. But that said, thank you everyone for joining tonight. For housekeeping, I would just say, for the time being, please keep your microphone on mute. There will be opportunities to ask questions and participate. Please feel free to utilize the chat function. We'll be monitoring the chat box and addressing questions as they come in. The commissioner will open it up and give his speaking portion, and throughout we'll be checking in with everybody if they have questions they'd like to ask either through the chat or verbally over a microphone. For those of you who may have called in by phone, I believe to participate by phone and unmuting yourself on the phone, you just press *6, and then I believe you press *6 to again mute yourself, which we kindly request that you do after you're done speaking. So I think that's about it in by way of table setting, and I'll hand it back to you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Joe. So New Year's are often a time for new commitments, renewals, things you want to change. And DDS is going to be no different this year. We're going to ask you to consider some of those things, and no better time to have a conversation about possible changes within the DDS system than here in the new year. Hopefully by now you've heard a little bit about what we refer to as ARPA funding, the American Rescue Plan Act funding that was provided through the federal government to states who applied for it, and specifically to their home and community-based waiver systems. DDS is a home and community-based waiver system. It's an exciting opportunity that comes to us at a unique time on the heels of a pandemic, at the height of a workforce crisis, and with following a wave of retirements from the state. And nonetheless, we have a very limited amount of time to try and leverage this money to improve the system, to improve outcomes, to expand opportunities for people already getting supports. And my hope is that it also will include providing supports to people not yet receiving supports by way of using our creativity and a variety of things that Deputy Commissioner Elisa Velardo will give a higher level overview to, or a more specific overview to, in just a few minutes. I want to dispel a few myths that may be out there and circulating. I fear that some people, and I've heard from some people, that what I'm talking about is potentially eliminating group homes, eliminating group home opportunities. And I want you to know that that is not the case. This is, the way I see it, an opportunity to leverage the investment we have in those group homes to serve as many people as we can, while considering people potentially supported there now, or may have thought that that's the type of support or service they wanted when they came into our services, to consider new and different opportunities that might incorporate different levels of independent living, a variety of technological opportunities that are innovations that happen every day. But this is not about displacing people from their current opportunities or putting people at risk. This is about trying to make the whole thing better and to live the mission that I live every day, which I wake up and I say, how can I provide the supports to as many people as possible in the right place and at the right time and in the right way. So that's really what this is about. And to let you know that we can't do it alone. DDS can't do it alone. We need our providers, we need our families, we need all of our stakeholders, we need those we support to be invested in this conversation, to be a part of potential solutions, and to be a part of these discussions. Our self-advocates who work for me will often say nothing about us without us, and I live by that motto. So I want to include your input, your ideas. And I'm going to say, before I turn this over to Elisa, that we're working on our communication. We're working on our frontline workers to better educate them about these opportunities. We're also trying to make sure that perhaps you've presented ideas before that DDS wasn't receptive to. Perhaps you have ideas about ways we could do things differently, and people within the system aren't always open to them, or think that there are too many barriers to make them happen. We want to hear from you in particular. Maybe there's ideas that have been trotted before DDS before that were shot down. Maybe it's time to reconsider them, particularly with the flexibility that the feds have given us in the use of this funding to innovate, to inspire, to transform the system. So that's sort of the quick high-level overview for me. I want you to think about questions and conversation pieces you want to offer tonight, because really this is an opportunity for me to hear from you, and less about you hearing from me. But I think it's important that Elisa give you an idea of some of the work, an immense amount of work that's already gone on that covers all aspects of our services, from self-determination to traditional group home models, to shared living, to self-hire programs, to work opportunities, to different living models, to all those things. This is hopefully there's something in this for everyone. And with that, I'm going to figure out if I can mute using my phone and allow Elisa to talk for a little bit, and then I'll rejoin you shortly for conversation.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can everyone hear me? Great. Well, welcome everyone. We're really excited to be speaking tonight. I'm Elisa Velardo, Deputy Commissioner. And as the Commissioner said, I will give you a high-level overview on the different initiatives that are included under ARPA. And if you're interested, there's a lot more information on our website. If you go on the DDS website and look under ARPA initiatives, you will see a lot of detailed information about the different things that I'm going to touch on tonight. And our hope is that we'll have a great conversation and answer any questions that you have as well. So the DDS ARPA spending plan funds a number of initiatives that, as the Commissioner said, will help to strengthen and enhance our service system. And the first that I'm going to talk a little bit about is stabilizing the provider network. We know that workforce stability and the ability to retain and recruit quality staff has been a major issue within the provider network. It has for quite some time, but over the last several years, that has really been, I think, the primary issue that we've been contending with as a service system. So we've made pretty significant payments that are designed to assist our provider network to stabilize their workforce, recruit quality staff, and just as important, retain the good quality staff members that they have. The next area is the expansion and integration of the use of assistive technology There has been a ton that's gone on in the area of assistive technology over the last several years. We've seen the implementation of assistive technology just expand, and there's new technology coming out all the time. We have some of our DDS experts on this call. And so we can talk a little bit more about what's happening in that area, but there have been a number of what we call notices of opportunities that have been available to individuals, families, and providers. There's one that you can currently find on our website that provides the opportunity to maximize the use of assistive technology. Another area that is funded through ARPA is geared at enhancing self-direction for those people that hire their own staff. One of the things that we've done is we've executed a contract with a provider that's going to expand our online employment platform. Rewarding work to have much more capacity and to assist individuals and families to identify potential staff and screen those staff. Another area under self-direction is improving the role and responsibility of the fiscal intermediary. And there's a lot of work going on in that area as well. ARPA also extends to our own DDS quality systems. So there are a number of initiatives that relate to our internal systems. That includes our ability to our case management system, the capacity that we have to capture data internally, the way that we capture critical incidents and are able to really look at trends in that area. Some of you may have participated in the NCI process, National Core Indicators. That's a national project that Connecticut has been involved in for many years. And we're expanding and formalizing our involvement with NCI. And just as important, the data that we capture through NCI, making sure that we're making the most of that. And we're also exploring the feasibility of outcome-based or incentive payments to providers. And then last, but certainly not least, is an initiative that maybe you are most likely to have heard about, and that's called the Moving On Plan. And that Moving On, also known as system transformation, has generated quite a bit of conversation. This is where individuals and their teams will have the opportunity to look at redefining how they live and work in their communities. We want folks to have the opportunity to integrate new types of supports to really allow people to be as independent as possible. And we've been meeting with our provider community. We have had ongoing engagement with families, and we want to talk more about that Moving On initiative tonight. So what we've done so far as we're implementing all these initiatives is we've worked on building our internal team. So we have our ARPA internal team. Peter Mason, former deputy commissioner, is leading this initiative with a team of internal staff. And we have engaged with some consultants as well to get this work done. And we have created multiple mechanisms to do that. So we have committees that include families, individuals, staff, providers, and they've been informing this ARPA process right along. And there's people that are on this call that are members of these different committees. And so we look forward to hearing from you tonight. The different committees that are in place are an overall advisory committee that is engaged in advising us on the transformational work. And then there are some specific committees that look at particular areas. So there's a day transformation committee looking at how we can maximize opportunities for individualized employment, competitive integrated employment opportunities. There's our ARPA Residential Transformation Committee, and that's looking at expanding opportunities for people to live in individualized settings through their home. We have the DDS ARPA Engagement Committee, and that group is looking to make sure that throughout our agency, all of our staff are really aware of these ARPA initiatives and can provide support around facilitating the process, answering questions. And then we have an individual and family engagement committee, and that group is looking at how we can connect with individuals and families and really make sure that this information is available and any questions are answered. So these committees have been in place for quite some time. We have been benefited already, and we look forward to hearing additional recommendations that will come out of these committees. And our goal here today is to make sure that you leave with a stronger understanding of ARPA, that you have the ability to provide feedback to us in terms of how we can make this project successful. And so with that, I'd love to open it up to questions, and we look forward to your feedback.
Do we just unmute and speak?
So,
Or
for those of you, I appreciate the question. For those of you who would like to ask a question, I would encourage you to either raise your hand, just so we have some sort of cue that we can go back to and make sure that we're following up with everybody who might want to ask a question. However, was that Lynn who just asked that? Oh, I wasn't sure who had asked that. Forgive me.
yes, I did. I guess I jumped the instruction gun there.
No, Lynn, since you spoke up, feel free to ask your question. And from here on out, we'll try to have folks raise their hands or put their question in the chat.
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, I just wanted to say that I so appreciate all of the supports that my son Carl has received from DDS with his apartment that he's in, the community supports and the rent subsidies. There's just so many things, and recently a behavioralist assigned to him. I'm just so grateful for those things. And I just wanted to say that you know, before the pandemic, my son was really like kind of a model of how somebody with more significance
Hey,
needs.
sweetie,
Yeah.
do you mind just turning the TV down just a teeny bit?
Oh, okay. As I was saying, he was really doing quite well, and the pandemic rocked his world like it did to so many people with disabilities. And he has way more behaviors, and some very serious ones, even with one situation where he had to go to the hospital because the self-injury was so great. So I have talked to the commissioner about my wanting to eventually switch Carl from his own apartment to keep him in his own apartment, but with a system like the iDash system, which I'm very interested in, where people are in their own apartments, but there is 24 supervision in another apartment. So I keep beating that drum to ask about that. Also, the technology piece, assistive technology is important, but in the case of my son, when the technology fails, there's massive meltdowns and broken screens and broken televisions and stuff like that. And thirdly, I'm wondering about service dogs and therapy dogs as a possible solution to people with behaviors to help them be more independent if they had something like that. So those are my thoughts about what my son now needs, since he's kind of really changed a lot since the pandemic.
Thanks, Lynn, for that feedback. So I don't have any direct feedback for you on animal therapist type arrangements, and whether or not that's a waiverable service or not. But we'll take notes of that and see what we can find both locally and across the country. One of the interesting things about our time right now is that many states are going through the same process we are going through. Almost every state applied for these types of dollars and for this opportunity. So we'll take a look around at the national scene and see if anyone is doing anything with regards to that and see if we can understand a little bit more. We are continuing, and we too are excited about what we had previously called IDASH housing, which we call group supported living, subsidized housing. It's got a variety of names. We have a number of developments. I don't know that we have any yet approved near where you and Carl live, but Elisa, can you just give a quick update on how many of those are open and how many of those are in the works, and any efforts towards promoting them further?
I can. Thank you. Yes, so the supportive housing started with the 3 IDASH projects that are up and running. One in Bloomfield, one in Canton, and one in Hartford. And then we've gone on and continued to partner with providers, and the 2 most recent supportive housing developments have been in Torrington and West Hartford that is opening this month. We have quite a few, I think about 8 that are in the works. Those are supportive housing developments that are developed from the ground up. And so they take a little bit of lead time, about 2 years. We just provided commitment letters for projects that are currently in the application phase. And so we anticipate that more supportive housing is going to be available throughout the state. One of the ARPA initiatives is to expand supportive housing. And so another way that supportive housing happens in Connecticut is those IDASH-like developments, the ones that I'm talking about, that's called project-based. It's supportive housing around one particular development that is approved and developed from the ground up. There's also vouchers that are available that are not project-based. And so we anticipate that opportunities to identify developments that are already available, and then partner with those property owners and property managers to identify some opportunities within the development will be another way that we'll be able to expand supportive housing. So supportive housing does relate to ARPA, and one of the goals of ARPA is to expand that opportunity. And then you mentioned assistive technology, and when specific to assistive technology, I can talk a little bit about what's in place, but I can't recall if you had a specific question as it pertained to Carl.
As it pertains to Carl, who's actually calling me right now? He has some really severe behaviors when technology doesn't work, or even if he perceives there's a delay in it. So
let me see if I can offer a couple things, and they may not be applicable for Carl, but having toured some of the group homes and in places where we use some of that technology, some of the two-way talking devices that are used in remote supports or for people to get access to staff who aren't present in the building, they're behind. We've put them behind plexiglass that makes the devices. The microphone still works, the camera still works, and as strong as Carl may be, we have found with some of our
some individuals who can be pretty destructive that they have not been able to disable this equipment. It's a little more expensive than some of the other equipment that we've used. But if that's a concern, we'd rather make the investment once in something that's going to last than continuing to replace technology. Eventually, one outdoes the other. But a lot of the very accessible technologies available on something as basic as an iPhone. And if your loved ones are like mine, those screens crack pretty readily, drop on the ground, knocked off a countertop, whatever those things are, and they're expensive to replace. But we'll bring that back to the technology committee. I do think there's some heavier duty stuff being designed specifically for a variety of populations, including those that we support. So we can look more into that for you.
And I might want to add, I don't know if you've been to one of the DDS respite centers, but one of the things that we did over this period of COVID was outfit all of our respite centers as smart homes. And so if you were interested in coming out and looking at what technology is available, our goal is to have the respite centers be demo centers so that individuals and families can come see what might be possible and get an idea of what might work before ordering equipment or making a commitment to purchase something. And so if you would be interested in that, I know I believe Dwayne Dyer is on this call, and he would be a great contact person as far as the respite centers and the assistive technology available there.
Dwayne, how do you say his name?
Dwayne, do you have anything additional to add? It's Dwayne Dyer, D-Y-E-R.
I have a question. This housing initiative, would it include, say, a parent that has a house already set up and their son is living in it and they don't have a roommate? We did have a roommate, but because of his behavior.
Amy, you got muted.
I
I
did.
apologize.
Let me
Yeah.
check.
So you got muted again. Okay, now you're live. Now you're not. Click once.
There was no resources on how to find someone, so I just don't know how to go about getting him a roommate, and this seems like it's a great house, it's in a wonderful neighborhood, it can walk to everything. So would you have some kind of a list or?
So we don't have a list yet.
Yeah.
But I do think, so one of the questions in the chat is the time frame on this spending.
Mhm.
And I believe that our intent is to expend it all by 2025. So it puts us in about a 3-year window, maybe only 2.5 left on that 3-year window, which is a fair amount of time. I do think roommate matching is an important part of what we need to do, Amy, and there are ways that we can work with families around living situations like that. One of the programs that we stood up a number of years ago was something called shared living. And we didn't do a great job of making that accessible and understandable for families. So Chris Secaroli, who's the South Region Regional Director, formerly from our public division, is on the call tonight with a couple of competing priorities. So I know he's listening in, but I did ask him in his new role to take the time to reinvent our shared living approach. And he's very interested in doing so. And I think that type of approach, based on the little bit you've shared with us so far, might be the way to go to provide supports to your loved one and a friend or someone we work to match them with. And I think someone else had a similar question. They said they're in the same boat as you in that.
What if she lives near me?
But Chris, Joe will make sure that we get Amy, we get your name and contact information to Chris. So when he starts to work through that process, we can include you in on the ground floor of what that conversation about reinventing it might look like. And it may be an avenue forward for you.
I would love that, because I'm actually going to take on a typical person that's needs somewhere to live for 6 months. Because I do really want him to be set up with, with someone like him.
And I will
So
also
maybe
share
by then we'll have some a program up and running.
one of our colleagues from Marrakesh is on the call tonight. And put her name in the chat. I think it was a her to connect with you around that. So when someone asked about when we say I-, what do we mean? It originally stood for intellectual disability, autism supported housing, and it was a specific round of federal funding that has been exhausted. We have carried that forward because it was in the governor's budget book under Malloy, and we've just continued to use that. It's technically not I- funding anymore, but we've sort of branded our shared living, our supportive housing programs as I-. We're trying to rebrand them so that they're all called supportive housing, regardless of where the funding came from. But to answer one of the questions in the chat, Joe, are there other questions in the chat that we should get to before taking more open mic?
Yep, absolutely. So one was what is the acronym for this housing, which you just referred to as I-, that's IDASH. Valerie Williams just asked, what are some of the timelines? I believe this was posed shortly after Elisa's remarks. And Elisa, forgive me, you may have addressed that, but just in case you haven't.
So as the commissioner said, the ARPA period goes through March of 2025.
Thank you, Elisa. So going to the following question in the chat, Denise Ricker just typed, I have a couple of families that have different ideas that may be unique. Is there someone in particular that I should direct them to see if it is feasible?
So my response to that would be to start with your case manager. And we have, I think we have one of our case managers who's part of our committee work on the call tonight. And she would likely encourage you to start with your case manager. I will encourage you that case managers face the same bureaucracy that some of you feel you face. And if they are not able to get your answers, that you come back to us, anyone on the call tonight, and we'll continue to consider whatever it is you've put forward to address. But I think the best place to start is your case manager. We have started having these same sessions that we're having with you tonight with our internal staff to encourage them to be forward thinking and open-minded about the types of things that you may bring forward to them. If you don't have a case manager, then email me directly, or email Elisa or Joe, who was helpful in registering you, or whomever else it may be.
And I would add, if you don't have a case manager but utilize our DDS helpline, they may be a resource as well. And I'm seeing that, and I didn't anticipate this. This is our first family session, but people are sharing resources in the chat, which is lovely. And so there are very nice responses as far as resources that as people are talking or asking questions that are being provided in the chat. So thank you.
Cress has shared with me that I'm not reading the names as I'm reading through some of the questions. Denise actually works for us, and so we'll make sure. She was one of the people asking who to route these to. Denise, I think you go chat with Cress or Kathy or Brian, and if you have thoughts about things you want to do, we'd love to hear from you, and you can funnel them through leadership in the region.
Okay, great. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
you guys didn't know that I was a case manager, but yeah, I've worked with Crest before, and I was actually, I think Jordan, we had talked previously on another forum because I was the one case manager in the state that did the creative housing when we did that a few years back. And yeah, it's kind of a passion of mine, but I have had actually a couple families call me in the last few days asking about particular situations. And I know that I've actually been able to circumvent people being put in group homes several times and being creative about their housing. And it's worked out for families, the people, and not to say it saves our budget more, but it all works out all the way around. But yeah, I will then talk with Cress about seeing what we can do to be more creative about things. Thanks.
That sounds great. And thanks for participating tonight. I really appreciate it. Just covering a few of the things in the chat, and we'll break them off into pieces. So Sue asked about supportive housing for people with autism. We are, for those who are unaware, people over an IQ of 70 who are on the spectrum are not supported by the department any longer. There was a time where they were. However, we are working with Department of Social Services and are looking to make housing units available, not just to those we support, but people from the autism community and other marginalized populations who would benefit from such a model. So the answer to your question is IDASH funding was intended to fund housing for adults with autism as well. And we can work with you to see what opportunities are out there as these developments come online. So I want to move to another. Go ahead.
Commissioner, so there's a couple of questions I'm happy to kind of go through in the chat. We do have a raised hand. It's by Denise. There was another raised hand earlier, and we'll get to all raised hands in just one moment. I see Maureen has now just raised her hand. Thank you, Maureen. I see you. We will get to you, I promise. I just want to clear the chat real quick. So the next question was, can you explain how this ARPA funding will help to retain the quality staff that work at my sister's group home in Bloomfield? They are incredible and we are so blessed, yet their compensation is minimal.
So Elisa, do you want to talk about retention and workforce development? That's also part of ARPA.
I can, yes. So the workforce stabilization funds are designed for that very purpose. So they're, and I'm going to speak specifically to ARPA. There are other things that are going on with wages and benefits that are also recognizing the importance of retaining a qualified workforce. But for ARPA, we've made payments to providers that the provider makes the determination how best that funding can be used to attract and retain staff. And they've used each provider, depending on their location and what they've identified as the greatest need, can make the determination. But some of the things that have been done is sign-on bonuses for hard to fill positions. It may be retention bonuses. It may be employee referral incentives. They have funding available that's particularly designed to stabilize the workforce. So hopefully that is helpful. That is a comment that we see very, very often, is that there are some really, really wonderful people that work really hard, and what can we do to make sure that they're able to continue to do what they love. And so this workforce stability payments are designed to do that.
Elisa, there's another question here, and Commissioner, of course. Can you speak to some of the work opportunities, self-directed, for example?
So I can speak to the self-direction as it relates to ARPA, are some of those things that we talked about. With self-direction, as with the provider network, as with DDS, staff recruitment has been one of the biggest barriers. And so in terms of employment, having an opportunity, having a job, but not having support to be able to either get to that job or the supports needed to retain employment has been a barrier. And so the rewarding work, that virtual platform that I talked about, should expand ability for individuals and families to identify staff in their area that meet those requirements. And so that should be helpful not only for in-home supports, but for employment supports. And then specific to work, I talked about the day transformation committee. And the goal of that committee is to look to identify people that are currently in either site-based or congregate settings that really want to work and to really assist people to move from those group settings to individualized employment-based settings. And what's happened there, we're in phase 1 of that. So in December, providers had the ability to fill out a very quick survey indicating if they had an interest in participating in phase 1. Some were vocational providers, some were residential providers, some providers provided both day and residential services. And they will be working on developing a plan that will identify people. And of course, it would be in conjunction with the team, with the individual, their guardian, case management with the team to support people to move from those group settings into individualized employment-based opportunities. And there are incentives that are built in, pretty significant. So if a person needs additional support, or if the provider needs to put in some additional resources in order for people to successfully move from that group setting into an individualized employment focused setting, those incentives are designed to help with that. And so we've sent out now for those providers, and I think there have been over 20 providers statewide. So we got a really good response considering this is just the first phase. Now have a template that they'll be working on where they describe how they're going to go about it, how they're going to go about supporting people for that movement to occur. And we have our regional teams that'll be reviewing those plans, and that's how we anticipate the movement into more employment focused opportunities will occur. We'll learn from phase 1 and we may adjust things. And so there will be a second phase that'll start sometime around March. And that'll extend to more providers, but this is a really good solid start.
Thank you, Elisa. I think I'd like to hand it over to Maureen Rosselli, who has had her hand raised for quite some time. So maybe we'll go to her question and then we'll go to the chat. Friendly reminder to everyone who has joined us, feel free to raise your hand if you have a question and we'd like to ask it verbally. You can also put your questions in the chat. If you've joined by phone and you would like to participate that way, I believe *6 is to unmute and *7, I believe, is to raise your hand if you're on the phone. So just wanted to say that quickly if you've joined us since we began. So Maureen, feel free to unmute yourself and answer your question.
Well, hello. If you don't mind, I'm going to sign at the same time because we have some deaf people that are online right now. I wanted to let everyone know they can click the button on the bottom for reactions and see they can raise their hand. Maybe helpful to you to notice who's raising their hand. Okay, but first, I thank you for this open forum. I appreciate the opportunity. I represent an agency called Beautiful Life, adult day and home care service. We were recently approved by DDS to become a provider, and specifically with deaf, blind, and hard of hearing individuals. Provide services both in a daycare and a home care. And it's a little bit hard to talk and sign at the same time, but I hope you can follow me so far. The reason that I joined this call is because I feel that I've heard deaf community, and many are receiving DDS services, I know, and they are concerned about placed into group homes and things like that, because many times the community is lacking, and there's really no way to come other than writing. So the unique the uniqueness that we as Beautiful Life provide is that we hire deaf workers who go and provide the services for the deaf individuals. So I just wanted to know a little bit about, you brought up about the ARPA, and you said something about stabilizing the provider network. More specific what you mean by that. And I know for Beautiful, we were concerned that not all DDS locations are aware of our uniquenesses. So I didn't know if this was the appropriate place to bring that up, but I thought I would try. So thank you.
I appreciate you doing so, Maureen, and we're going to follow up with you in a way for you to get your message out outside of this forum tonight. As you are very aware, services for deaf and hard of hearing and the other categories you described are somewhat limited. We do have other providers that have developed some homes with ASL competent staff who are trained. And we have a couple others coming online, but we need more. And some competition among those providers in those arenas is always great. So we'll follow up with you directly and see what we can do to help you in terms of getting the word out, et cetera. And there are provider forums that we do as well. And I'm not sure if you're yet on that list for our provider forums, but we'll make sure that when we do have provider meetings specifically, that you're invited to those as well. And welcome aboard. We are always happy to have more people helping us make the mission, live the mission. So thank you. I hope I was responsive to your question. Noticed another question in the chat and then I'm going to turn it over to Deirdre Toole. But around what happens to the subsidies when the ARPA funding ends. The supportive housing don't have time limits. We're using that money. Those aren't ARPA funds that would actually subsidize the units. The ARPA funds are being used a little differently for that. But we made a commitment to the Secretary at OPM that the large majority of the investments we're making are not going to put bind the legislature going forward to have to pick up commitments we can no longer fulfill. So in the manner that we're spending the money, these incentives and these programs and these transitions and some of these periods of safety so people can try new things and still have access to the services they might be willing to look at differently, won't be impacted at the end of the ARPA fund. So you shouldn't have to worry about that. And Deirdre or Deirdre, I know two people who call themselves by each. You tell me how you like to be called and we'd love to hear from you. You need to unmute first.
Hi, yes, actually it's Deidre.
Deidre.
Yeah, but that's okay. I get called many, many things. So I want to thank you very much for offering this tonight. I'm actually a transition special education counselor in Stonington, Connecticut. And I want to thank DDS for providing this opportunity. This is really exciting. And I just had a couple questions. The first is, we work really hard to get students employed, real money, real pay, real job. The issue we're having is once they get this job, I'll give an example. A student we just had exit at age 22, got a fantastic job. But when winter comes and it's dark and he can't ride his bike to work because he doesn't have a car, everything falls apart. We have a seat bus, a hot bus that is great, but it ends at 6 o'clock and it doesn't work on the weekends. So often many students over the years have gotten jobs. We've worked really hard to get them jobs. And then when they exit the school system, they lose their jobs because they can't walk or ride their bikes or get rides. Or their car falls apart. So I guess that to me is a huge, huge issue is transportation. And I hate to say that we work so hard and get all these supports from you guys, even to get to this place of real employment, and then they lose their jobs because there's no transportation. So do you have is there anything with this funding that we could do in these towns that don't have this infrastructure support? That's my first question. And then I had one more.
So first, I'll tell you that, when I work with the self-advocates, they tell me they only want three things: a place to live, a place to work, and a way to get back and forth. They make it sound really simple. Now I just have to get them that, and everyone will be happy. I think they're right, though. If we together could provide everyone we support a place to live, a place to work, and a way to get back and forth, a lot of the other things we worry about might go away. So the governor's very interested in expanding real public transportation to all parts of the state, particularly the four corners. Well, three of the four corners. There's more so down in the southwest corner, but the Torrington area, the northeast corner, and anything east of 395 suffers from a lack of accessible and affordable transportation. I don't know, Elisa, if any of the committee work had started to speak to the transportation needs. And I'll also say our ombudsperson, Shannon Giacovino, is on the call tonight. In her prior life and in her current life, she has advocated for those challenged by transportation repeatedly, and she may also have some ideas. But Elisa, if you want to speak first to any of the ARPA conversations around employment and transportation.
Well, this is in addition to ARPA. We have for the last year and a half been really looking at issues relating to integrated employment, competitive integrated employment, and transportation was one of the things that has come out of that. We have a group that's working on that. That's beyond DDS. We've got members from every area of the state, from transportation, from other state agencies, because it's a large issue and it's a great need. But I would not wait for the work of the transportation committee to address the issues that you're identifying. So one of the things that's been really clear to me as that group has been convening is we have some really creative staff that will figure out a way for the individual you're talking about to get back and forth to work. And there's a variety of ways to go about that. I would say if you want to reach out to me, Deirdre, I'll connect you. I don't know who the person is and who their case manager is, but I will definitely connect you with someone that can help to brainstorm about that case. But as far as the larger transportation issue, yes, we are working both within and outside of DDS to expand transportation opportunities for people. It's a huge statewide need.
Okay, thank you. And this also goes to, I work in the evenings with a lot of students that are with DDS for recreational opportunities for young adults. And we're having the same issue. Somebody comes and then it's cold out and they say, well, gosh, I don't have a ride home now. So, these are the recreational pieces are huge too. My second question though is I'm working in the Stonington Mystic area, and I don't want to name them, but there is a very large organization that is really trying hard to hire people with disabilities and done a really good job. They want to hire more people with disabilities. They've hired some of our students, but the question I have is, can this money be used? They're right now saying they want to hire more people with disabilities. They just don't have the supports in place when things don't go perfectly. So they need more staff to help support those adults so they continue to work for the rest of their lives. They just don't have a staff that has the expertise to kind of go in and solve some of those problems so they don't, snowball into bigger problems. So can this money be used for something like that?
We want to help you solve that, whether it's ARPA money or anything else. So when you connect with Elisa, why don't you connect on both? And we'll bring in Southeast Region staff. We have an office in Norwich, and we have employment specialists throughout the state. I'll also let you know, as I'm calling out people, and you were kind not to. There's staff from a CT Family Support Network on the call tonight who are hearing this, who will make sure that we follow up, as well as Disability Rights Connecticut, who we've invited to sit at these tables with us. And I think their involvement is important as we look to partner to solve some of the issues around employment. One of the questions in the chat, and then I'm going to go to Teresa and then Carol, was around a concern, and I don't see the chat right in front of me at the minute, but whether it was about congregate or sheltered, I'm not sure what words the person used in the chat, but what happens to their loved one when those services go away? And I think that we want to hear more from you about those concerns, and I think some of the other people on the call should hear more about that as well. Are you able to come off mic and talk a little bit? Come off mute and talk a little bit about that concern? I don't want to put you on the spot, and you don't have to, but it's sometimes compelling to hear concerns directly from those we support and their families. So it's an important conversation. I think a lot of people who benefit from some of the current supports are have a lot of concerns and a lot of apprehension about changes that we make to the system that would somehow leave their loved one out. I've been very clear with all the stakeholders and with all the advocate groups I talk about. I'm not interested in leaving anybody behind. So while we're looking to move forward, we're not looking to move forward without people. We want to all move forward together. So
I think that was me about the sheltered workplace.
Okay.
So is it okay to ask a question about that? Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So my son is still employed. He will be out of job end of the February. He works for sheltered workplace in Niantic. So at this point, we don't have any replacement work. And then what happened now? I mean, there is no communication or anything.
So Pearl, thank you for that. We want to make sure that they have a safe place to land. So we will reach back out to you so we can talk about the specific issue. But there are a limited number of opportunities, and some of them during this time are struggling. So we want to make sure we can help you with that.
Okay. So then my other question, because we live in small community, Madison, Clinton, Shoreline. So there are a couple local business, they're willing to help us out. So I probably able to find a job for him, but once again, they don't have resources financially take, additional expenses. Is there funding available to help them out if I find, opportunities for kids?
We're going to reach out to you and get a little more of the specifics, because the answer is probably, but we need to know a little more of the specifics before we could commit to anything like that. So we have your email from your registration, which is how you got in tonight. And Joe will make a note for us to contact you directly to talk a little bit more about those specific concerns. And we appreciate you raising them tonight.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Teresa O'Hara.
Yeah. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for being patient. We're going to get to everybody tonight. I appreciate you being patient with me.
Okay, great. The first thing I'd like to ask is there a place where we can see a list of all of the subcommittees that have been put into place regarding all of these changes? And
Yes.
secondly, a list and people to contact, because I would have been extremely interested in working in any of these committees. So that's my first question.
Yep. Yes, there's a list, and yes, we're going to reach out to you on that.
Awesome. Okay, that would be fantastic. I also would just like to say we've had nothing but great experiences with DDS. The professionals that we've worked with have been outstanding. We did go all the way up to a petitioning process at one point for our daughter because she's not fitting into some of the boxes for the way to spend money, to her lawn score and the money that was attached to that. And she doesn't want to be in just a day program. She wants to work, and we're having a hard time really doing that. We'd like to spend that money, but it's hard sometimes. Sometimes it's geographic or whatever. Specifically, that kind of thing is, and I'm sure this isn't original. So that, my question is, are those the things that are being discussed at a higher level right now with this new funding, like being able to support every single or most of the individuals as opposed to some that just fit into the boxes easily?
So thank you, Teresa. one of my personal goals in the work that we're doing is that we become more flexible in the way that we allow for supports to happen. I say that our funding is on 50 cents on the dollar comes from the federal government. In order to bill the feds through the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, we have to define our services in such a way that they think that they merit reimbursement. And that leads the institution of DDS down a path where we create boxes to then put people in, so that you're not trying to authorize. At the time that they conceived of our what we call our waiver, the home and community-based services waiver, we created boxes and we created rules for those boxes, but we're in control of those. So this opportunity that the feds have given us now is to explore and to push a lot of the boundaries in places where we may have previously said no, and consider ways to say yes. So our current annualized authorizations are for those very specific fits the mold services, but we want these conversations to lead us towards, right now we have a continuum of supports that's very segmented. There's 8 or 10 different styles of residential support, and that's it. You get to shop from that limited menu. There's 5 or 6 or 8 different day type of supports, maybe a little more. You have to shop from that menu, and if what you want is not on that menu, we don't have something for you. This is a time for you, providers and advocates, to challenge the system, to try and create that flexibility, to see if we can provide people the support they really want and not just the ones we offer on that limited menu. So,
okay, and for us to do that, what do we do?
Start with your case manager. If you don't have it,
we've done that, we've petitioned, but we've done that. We need to be, my husband and I need to be involved, and also the rest of us on here. I'm sure there's many other people who don't fall into the cookie cutter aspect of it. We are so appreciative of that lawn score of 3, and we're so appreciative of the money that is attached to it. But, you know, when you work for years, from the day your child is born up until they're 23, 24, and you throw your life into it, and you get to this point, and all of a sudden that person just wants to go and work and go and they can't because of, you know, certain things. It's really hard. So we would really like to help.
So we appreciate that. I'm assuming you live somewhere in the South region.
Yeah, I hope I got onto the right one. We're also, I'm away from all, my daughter's in New Haven. That's South, right?
You're in the right town. You're in the right meeting. And Cress is on the call tonight, and some of the staff are as well, and case managers like Denise and some others, and Shannon Giacovino. So we'll make a point to follow up with you and to hear what it is you're trying to do, and to see what barriers we have in place and whether or not we can eliminate them or not.
I appreciate you, and I appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Thanks for participating tonight and for challenging us, Teresa. I appreciate it. Carol Cooney, you've had your hand up a long time, but I'm going to ask, Maria has raised her hand and posted some things in the chat that lead me to believe I'm going to go to her first and then to you next. And Maria, are you able to communicate with us tonight via this chat? I know you mentioned there's some challenges for you in participating.
Yeah. Can you hear me and see me?
I can hear you and I can see you. You're doing great so far, Maria. Thanks for being on the call tonight.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm using sign language, and there's some that people on the call. So I'm myself, that's why, meaning I can hear some and also low vision. And I'm a DDS client, and I live in a group home, but not in a hearing home. I live like 45 minutes away from my family, and I live in a group home where all the clients who are deaf, almost all the staff who are deaf fully sign. So this is the only place in the state of Connecticut. So honestly, we need more, because it's like 7 of us.
And we need more people because honestly, many people need help and want to move out of the family home for whatever reason, or they need support, stuff like that. And then also, like for example, I occasionally I go to Walmart and sometimes temptation is a challenge for me. I was this agency, like Marie said, I was this agency called Beautiful Light adult and home care services, and I go there 2 days a week. And sometimes it's frustrating for me because transportation is hard sometimes. So I hope you understand. I appreciate it.
Maria, I understood you very clearly and you did a great job advocating. And have you ever met any of the self-advocate coordinators who work for DDS, like Varian Salters, or I'm trying to think of the two ladies down in the South region, Cress, or Denise?
Natasha, James,
Kelly,
Jordan in the
Kelly's
South
one of
region,
them.
we have
Kelly. Yeah.
Paige and Kelly and Carol in the South region.
No,
Okay. Do you participate in any of the self-advocacy groups out that way?
no.
Okay. So we're like we've told some of the other people who've expressed concerns. I want to follow up with you. I want to connect you to some of the self-advocates. I think they'd be really impressed to hear your message and concerns tonight, and they can also help you elevate those. And I know we heard from, I'm sorry, I'm sometimes bad with names, but we heard from some staff from programs tonight, and I'm scrolling through my screen looking for her now.
Maureen.
Oh, she's looking at me. Hi, Maureen. Thank you. Maureen was selling.
Have heart because have heart because my daughter, her high school just started offering signs, and they're actually full, and there's a huge wait list for the kids to get into them because so many people want to do it. And I because
You're breaking up on us, Maureen. So I'm gonna come back to you, but we'll reach out to you, Maria. And I think part of the concern that you expressed is that in order to live in a home where you can feel supported by staff who speak and communicate the way you do, you have to live 45 minutes away from your family, and that's hard for you. Did I understand that part right?
Yeah, but I live in a group home with the only group home is for the deaf.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, we have a few more that have come online, so we're going to follow up with you as well. I thank you for joining tonight and sharing that concern.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll be back in touch with you. It was really good to see you tonight. Carol, you have your hand raised?
Can you hear me?
I can, Carol.
Okay. I have a daughter, middle-aged, who's in a group home, and I was recalling as we're doing this program that at her last IP, which is almost a year ago, the case manager recommended an assistive technology assessment. And it dawns on me that I don't even know if that happened or where or when or how. I had asked about it originally. So the concept has been included in her meetings in the past. However, just as a for instance, she purchased an iPad and it's somewhere in the office there. My perception of this home, which works very well for her, is I don't know how anybody would have time and possibly training or understanding to help her with any assistive technology. There's a senior in the home who does wear an emergency button around her neck, and she's quite high functioning, so she can handle that. And I've also gone out of my way when she lived at my house, say 10 years ago, to go and look up in the Meriden business for assistive technology. I can't recall the name, to see what was available. And most of it, I mean, the only thing that we wound up purchasing to take one step towards independence was just a medication dispenser that would, ding at the time that she needed to take her medicine. But I'm having difficulty envisioning this actually working.
So
Are there staff? I mean, how does this get set up?
Thanks, Carol. So we have some staff within DDS who've been certified and trained to do that. And with the ARPA funding, we're looking to increase in the private sector additional people and we'll make available to, if I remember correctly, to agencies wanting to promote and try and find uses for assistive technology to train and provide staff throughout the state who can assist with that. For families not familiar with assistive technology, I just want to give you some ideas of the continuum of supports. You know, we talk a lot about remote supports, and I think for a lot of the individuals whose lawn scores may be lower, there's a lot of ways that might be helpful. For some people who have some extreme mental health concerns, living alone is better sometimes than living communally, but can't live alone with 24/7 staff. So some of that plays in there, but some of the technology is very simple. Communication, reminders for people who don't ambulate well, being able to control lights and television and doors and locks in their house by voice or toggle button. If you have other, you know, if you have cerebral palsy and you have very limited range of motion with your extremities, there's technology available that can alert staff if you are someone who utilizes adult undergarments because of incontinence, can alert them when you're wet. So instead of having to be interrupted when they go to check you or to toilet you is the phrase that was commonly used when I was growing up in the system. Rather than be invasive like that, it can be something that just lets them know you can live a less interrupted life. And from very basic technology to very, very complex technologies, from very inexpensive technology to very, very expensive technology. And the amount of things that are being, the number of tools made available increases literally every day. And a lot of the R&D that we're benefiting from, the research and development we're benefiting from, was originally targeted at aging populations, but we found broad application for a lot of that technology in the work that we do. So I think the place you probably referenced was ARC of Meriden Wallingford, Mid-State ARC.
No, this was a private business.
I think it's probably Mario at Assistive Technology
Yes,
Solutions.
yeah.
A lot has happened in the last 10 years. I just put Dwayne Dyer's contact information in the chat. Dwayne had reached out. He's having difficulty with his microphone. It's the night for that. Dwayne is a great resource in the South region. He can give you information about evaluations. There are some things that are happening right now. There's a current opportunity for providers that's available right now on a rolling basis through ARPA, where that, Carol, if that evaluation hasn't happened, it can. There's funding available. And then based on what comes out of that, any necessary technology, an iPad, there are some apps that are really wonderful, very user-friendly.
Yeah. I can imagine that, but
Dwayne
it would take a lot of training and guidance and assistance, you know. And when it's a situation where there's one staff member in a home, that, you know, I can see where a lot of the time it's not easy, you know, to do that in addition to all the other things that have to happen, you know.
I think you're spot on. And part of this opportunity, I think, is not expecting that the direct support professionals are going to also do all of the training to support the use of assistive technology. I think these opportunities they build in time for training to make sure that the individual is comfortable with the technology. If it's not working quite right, it can be adapted. So reach out to Dwayne because he does that. In fact, I've had conversations where he'll just follow up and follow up and follow up until it's working, until the person's comfortable, until staff understand what the technology is designed to do. So I think that training piece is built in it has to be in order for the technology to be useful.
Right. Thank you very much. I do have another question, if I might. She also she has a split week where part day program, and she used to work full time before COVID. So she worked at Marshall's. She loved the job. It was a perfect fit. It was also more local to where she lives. But she's with Sharp Training, and she's now working at the casinos, which personally as a parent, I feel is really a long haul on a daily basis, number one. But she still talks about Marshall's, and listening to you, I'm wondering if there's some way that I should be advocating for her with her case manager or otherwise to see if she can somehow maneuver back to Marshall's where she really wants to be.
I think you should try, Carol. I think that if the Marshall's near you is like any of the department stores near me, they're all hiring for all positions for all shifts. So I definitely think it's worth a shot, particularly if that's where she wants to work and that's the work that really made her happy. I would start with the provider and the case manager, and then if that doesn't get you where you want to go, keep working your way up the chain.
Thank you.
Carol,
Also, Carol, this is Denise Ricker. Sorry. I had a client that was actually with a different agency, and they were at Marshall's, and their job ended a few years back as well. So I'm not sure if Marshall's just decided that they weren't going to be doing
I'm
that,
not sure.
you know,
What I'm
doing
being told, I was told that they would not allow them back until masks were not an issue, but I'm beginning to wonder about that at the moment. I know that they have hired,
I know TJ Maxx did the same thing. They also let go of a lot of people during
but they
COVID.
have hired some individuals who I would consider somewhat higher functioning than my daughter as individuals, and they have not one-on-one support all the time. There's a support person, but it's kind of in and out, back and forth.
But I know a lot of my clients that I work with, I have them do split programs all the time. Like they'll do 2 days in one place and 3 days in another place. And I even mix up the programs, whether it's group supported or individual day. So it's definitely worth having that conversation. And I also wanted to let people know too that, all the case managers are all kind of at different places. So, there are some that might be brand new. There are some that are more seasoned and have been around a lot longer, and some that kind of specialize in different things. So if you get to a point where your case manager, because I have had agencies tell me that they've tried to do stuff that I've done with them with other case managers, and other case managers said we can't do that. They may just not be aware. So if you feel like you're getting that kind of resistance, you can speak with their supervisor or just say, well, I think we might be able to do this and just see if there's another way to navigate it, because they may just not know. It's not that they're not trying to help you or being all that they can be. They may just not know that it's possible to do those things.
Thank you, Denise. And I think you make a really good point. We have a lot of tremendous assets at DDS, including our case managers, but not all of them have strengths in the same areas. And that's a good thing. We embrace the diversity of our staff and their different talents. But sometimes when they meet together as teams, they can, if Denise is in a team and someone has some strengths in residential and she's got some strengths in other areas, they collaborate and can problem solve together. I wanted to address the concerns of a couple people, or address the questions of a couple of people who do not have a case manager, or at least do not have a case manager yet. So we only assign case managers after you have a service that's authorized annually, or about to have a service authorized annually. So if you're still in school, you don't have a case manager. If you haven't been made eligible for services, or received a day service or a residential service, you don't have a case manager. But you do have access to the helpline, which is a team of case managers and case management supervisors across the state who help the many, many people who don't have a full-time assigned case manager. If those resources are a struggle for you and you need help navigating that, I encourage you to contact anyone on the call tonight. I know that Shannon Giacovino, our ombudsperson, has helped guide a number of families through the frustration of accessing services and trying to figure out why they're not getting what they think they ought to be getting, and either fixing it or helping them understand better why they're not getting what they're getting. And we'll make sure that everyone on the call has all the email addresses and all the contact information we have provided this evening. And I see Coral has raised her hand. I want to come back to you in 1 second because there was one other thing in the chat I wanted to get to before I lost it. There was two questions. The use of assistive technology is not designed to replace staff necessarily. There are instances where it can for certain people, but it doesn't for everybody, and it isn't intended to rip staff from places. What it is allowed to do is to make the most use of your staff. So let me give you an example. For some people who live independently, relatively independently with minimal supports, they may get, let's say, 20 hours a week. If they have to use 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of that for getting their medication, or if they have to use 3 or 5 hours a week for food preparation, it leaves a very limited number of hours for community engagement, socialization, and medical appointments, and all the other things that they may need. If technology could help with the medication administration or in being able to have food preparation monitored or to use a food service, a meal service instead, then they can use the hours for other things that are less about getting through every day and more about living their best life. For people in larger settings and comprehensive settings, there's still good use of technology that doesn't replace staff, but maybe it sets standards that allow people to get up off the couch without staff assistance. Maybe it's communication devices so that they don't need staff in order to communicate with friends and family, that they can do it independently, and a whole variety of other things. But I started off with a little myth busting this evening about closing of group homes. I want you to know that we are not looking to replace staff with robots or to eliminate the use of staff in people's lives and replace it with technology. We're looking to get the most out of the money we have to support as many people as we can, to live as independently as possible, and for those not getting any supports to maybe get some. So that's the message on assistive technology. You shouldn't go to sleep tonight worried that we're going to get rid of the staff in your group home and replace them with something else. That isn't the plan, unless there are people who live there who would like to live with less staff in their lives, and there are a number of people who do. One more, and then we're coming to you, Coral. Programs around special need populations and families to start businesses. So we have done several rounds of grants to consider people who are looking to start businesses through our employment division. We just made a list of awards and certificates went out recently, from very small businesses like independent DJs to more commercial type enterprises to catering trucks to whatever it may be. And we would encourage you, we will get information out about the next round of grants. But if there are people who want to run their own business, engage in their own business, become an entrepreneur, and our traditional day services don't lend themselves to that. One, there's a host of providers out there who would love to talk to you because they like doing the entrepreneurial approach. And I won't name names, but contact us and we can point you their way. But also, even within our traditional, more traditional style day programs, this is an opportunity for those day providers to innovate as well. So if you have ideas about businesses you think have merit for allowing people with intellectual disability to work in integrated settings at competitive wages, we'd like to hear more about it. This is the opportunity to bring that up. So thank you for offering that in the chat. And then Coral, you've waited patiently for me. Would you like to come off mute and chat?
Yeah, so I have epilepsy, and I put in the chat box. So I live in Saybrook. I don't know if there's any housing near me, that independent housing I can try to independently live without mom by myself. Is there any possibility of that, or how should that work?
So I don't know enough about you, Coral, to be able to answer that fully. We'd like to talk to you more about that. There is one of those housing developments that is starting. Is it official yet? Elisa, the one out that way?
There are a couple out that way. I'm not great as far as distance from Saybrook, but there are a couple developments in that part of the state that are underway.
Hi, Lisa, this is Cress. The one closest to Old Saybrook, there's one that is in the very development phases in New London. I know that's not exactly in Old Saybrook, but it's about 20 minutes away from there and close to the highway. That would be the closest supported housing development that we have going on to Old Saybrook.
And it's probably about a year to a year and a half before it's livable, Cress, I would assume?
No, we're thinking possibly next fall.
So can you and staff follow up with Coral?
Yes, Coral. I'll message you directly in the chat and give you my email address.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Kathleen O'Toole?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Please go
Okay,
ahead.
great. Yeah, I'm just concerned that I understand that it is a good idea to encourage the parents to use innovative solutions to try to solve some of these problems, and that also that the cases are very individual by nature, so the problems vary a great deal. But I'm just concerned, DDS as an agency surely would have more power than maybe 100 separate individual parents trying to solve 100 separate individual problems. Why couldn't the agency as a whole, I think I would assume its mission would be to go out and maybe divide the state into the regions, address those regions with a coordinator maybe assigned to each region to see who are the providers in this region, what are the need for housing in this region, what is the need for employment. There are some common threads that apply to all the people with disabilities, although there are certainly individual variations. And as an agency, as a group, surely you would have more power than we as parents going around to addressing separate businesses, trying to find things within our area. I, for one, as a parent, I'm finding it hard to just, get through the day-to-day and some of the medical and the family concerns rather than trying to go out and start creating businesses so that, my son with a disability can have a job. And I would have expected that the agency would take a top-down approach and use its power to solve some of these problems. Aren't we just kind of leaving it up now, everyone running to their case manager? I think the case managers are going to be overwhelmed by addressing a million individualistic concerns, whereas they could be grouped together and a common solution or a solution that would benefit a great many people could be achieved by looking at the common needs of that entire group.
So let me first say that nothing in this country has ever changed without a boisterous bunch of advocates going out and saying change needed to happen. So don't underestimate the power of parents working together to change a system. And in fact, the entire system we have is created by parents in the 50s that led to the formation of institutions like the DDS. So don't underestimate the power of those parents. Believe me, I've lived experience at this point, and I get being tired at the end of the day, can barely hold things together, never mind work to advocate for my child. So I appreciate that. I don't think we're asking for parents to change the system or to create everything. There are some parents with some really creative ideas, and I want to hear from them. But those who are, our case managers are in place to hear the wishes of you and your loved one, and to help facilitate those outcomes. That's their job. They're expecting those calls. They're expecting those asks. Now, some will be more receptive than others to changing the system. And we're not looking at eliminating specifically types of services that already exist. So if what's already on the menu suits you, for the most part, that's okay. It's not going anywhere, or at least not anytime soon. And continue to shop from that menu. We're not trying to make people go to new places. We're encouraging them to. And we do think that when people are part of designing their own supports and services. We can tell you from statistical data across the country, people in charge of creating and designing their own services are happier with them than when relying on the state to provide a basic level of care. But that doesn't mean it's for everybody. And if that's the place where you and your loved one are at, then let us help you choose from that menu and make sure you get the right support so that your loved one can live the life they want to and the one that you think is best for them. We're not asking everybody not everybody needs something new. We don't need 1,000 new things, but there may be things that we don't do now that people want. And that's what this conversation's about.
I want to add to that. In tonight's call, it's striking me that, we've got so many people and so many individual kind of scenarios that we can't answer with the specificity that we would like. I want to make sure that folks understand that as we're having these conversations with you, we're having these conversations with case managers, and what we're saying to them is, we just had a discussion recently. They don't need to know every detail about every resource. What they need to know is who they can go to for more information. And so your suggestion, Kathleen, about there should be regional people that are kind of taking some of these trends or these needs, supporting them. There are. In employment, we have a great and phenomenal employment and day support team that will work with case managers. There's so much happening that we haven't even begun to talk about, customized employment for people that need a little bit more support. What the case manager needs to know is to reach out to get more information and who that contact person is. We have the same with assistive technology. We have a team that's working around supportive housing around the state, and so we have regional representatives there. So when we're saying, as questions are coming up, probably or reach out, it's so that we can dig in more specifically and connect you with whatever that resource is. Your case manager is always a great resource because they're networking with people throughout the organization, but they're not out there alone trying to figure it out. And then I see that Shannon Jacovino popped on camera, and Shannon's a great resource as well as our ombuds person to kind of connect people with whoever they need to be connected with. And I'd be remiss if I didn't identify Shannon as a resource, because she will work tirelessly to make sure that if there's something that you're running into, I see a rabbit hole or a roadblock, that we figure that out together.
And also what you and you were saying, and also Jordan said about how, the only thing that change has ever, it takes one person to make a change. And so you saying what you said tonight was really essential. And definitely, I'm sure we're all going to be thinking about it. But because the population we serve is so specialized and individualized, and one thing I've always known is that nobody, as much as I'd like to think I know an individual that I work with, nobody knows them better than their parent or family. And so you may have ideas that I wouldn't even think about, or you may know hurdles that I would have no clue about because you've been with them your whole life. And so by you working individually with the case manager, it makes it an easier fit to try to figure something out, as opposed to it just being kind of a general committee or chairperson or whatever in whatever region.
Can I just add one thing? I appreciate what you're all saying, and I agree with a great deal of it. I would just like to leave a thought that if you were like working in a business or anything which was dealing with a problem on a system-wide level, even though there may be many individual cases that need to be solved, and because this involves humans that have specific human needs, they're going to be very individualistic. There are still some common threads. I think we're missing the forest for looking at the trees. There are some common threads of things: employment, housing, supports. And you could also divide your population, although they're very individualistic. You could divide your population into those of needs, as you do now with the LON score, and then look at the big problems that each of those, that substrata of that population might be facing, and come up with some kind of structures. Not that that would apply to everyone, not that the case manager couldn't tweak it and make it different, but at least the parents would feel that there's a captain at the helm of the ship, that you see the major problems, the major themes, and that you look at it and create a structure that then one could go ahead and work from.
So that's what we're doing, right? We're engaging with literally hundreds of families across the state to hear their concerns. And over the next couple of years, we're going to synthesize the feedback, and we're going to try and target some of the key areas. I spoke earlier. It's three things: where do you live, where do you work, and how do you get back and forth? But it's not as simple as that. I've been talking about those three challenges for over 30 years, doing what I'm doing, particularly on the transportation front. I've seen very little in the way of change, whether that's in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, or Connecticut, and I've worked in all three states. But over 30 years, that's been the challenge. So yes, there's some information that's been brought forward tonight that we're going to try and solve on an individual basis, but we're going to synthesize all of the communication we're getting there tonight to try and come up with the solutions. Because as I indicated earlier, we can't just have, I have 17,000 people eligible for the department. I can't have 17,000 models of service necessarily, because the feds won't reimburse us. But I think I need to increase the short menu of services I have now, or at least expand the way we allow people to participate in those supports and services so that they better meet the needs of those we support, which is why I'm interested in hearing from you all this evening and why we're doing this community engagement. Believe me, it'd be way easier for me to sit in a dark room with a chalkboard and decide what I think is best for everybody with disabilities and then tell you this is what we're putting on the menu. But that doesn't serve everybody well. It'll serve the middle okay, but it won't serve the two ends of that continuum very well at all. So that's why we're doing this. And I know that it may seem frustrating because you want some help and you want some access and you want things to be readily available, and we hope that at the end of this process, it will be a better service and support system for you and your loved one. Anne, you have your hand up. Are you able to unmute, Anne?
I'm sorry. Yeah, it took me a minute there. Hi, everybody, and thanks for having this meeting. It's really amazing and good chance to hear about everything, excited about everything that's coming up. One of my biggest questions is, I know there's a staffing crisis now all over the country. So with this Moving On project, which correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you're going to need a lot more staffing if the goal is to try to, move more toward individualized supports and more independence for our individuals. That's going to take a lot of staff, more than currently is in place, which is challenged as it is. So I'm wondering about that.
So in addition to some of the incentives that we've made available to providers in the workforce arena, we engage in a variety of conversations nationally and locally with Department of Labor, federally, locally with our trades organization nationally, with the Governor's Workforce Council, and on individual efforts. For instance, my clinical staff has been engaged with a couple of the colleges, seeing if we can become a pipeline for LPNs and other nursing students, or for people in nursing school who are looking to make a living in the meantime, get them exposed to intellectual disability work by working for us while they're working their way through college and things like that. So we are engaged in that. It is a huge dilemma. This is, we came into this ARPA money, and this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. The kind of money that we have available to change and transform the system. It couldn't have come at a worse time. It's like the worst problem to have, because we're still not, most of us are still not fully over this notion of a pandemic.
Yeah.
We have this workforce crisis, but we've been talking about workforce crisis since I came into the field. that there's a workforce crisis, but in all the years I've been around it, and Shannon and I talk about this often, we've been talking about workforce crisis forever. She and I, in our different lives, and when our lives have overlapped, we've talked about workforce. Like nothing we've ever seen or could have imagined is the place we're at now. Not just clinical staff, but direct care staff. Looking back, I feel like I was the boy who cried wolf all those years when I was begging for staff. And boy, only being short 20 or 30% staff seems like a luxury these days for a lot of our providers. So it is a big problem to solve. I'm not asking families to fix the workforce issue. We're engaged, and I appreciate the offer in the chat. We're engaged with colleges, universities, technical high schools that have clinical programs. We're involved in PCA recruitment and anywhere we can. And I'm in the process and hoping to hear soon about potentially having a person assigned to the agency on a time-limited basis who will engage with providers full-time. Their only job will be workforce development. The only thing they'll do for DDS is to work with providers to help them build strategies towards improving workforce. I don't have approval on that yet, but I keep talking about it. One of the models we talked about earlier that I mentioned Crest would reinvent, that I had huge success with, and as we're talking about colleges and universities, group homes near them, when I was in Belchertown, Amherst, and Hadley, Mass, a long time ago, we ran shared living programs there that relied heavily on grad students out of UMass, Amherst, and Hampshire that would be the live-ins in these homes. And their requirement was to be at the house from Sunday night through Thursday night from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. They helped the ladies or the men at those homes with certain parts of their routine. But these were folks who really didn't need a lot of overnight attention, but just needed someone present in case something came up. And then we used other funds to pay so that those grad students could go to class and didn't have to be making dinner every night. We paid other people to do hours in those homes. I talked with a gentleman a couple of years ago in the North region, had done something similar to that at UConn a long time ago, and it broke. And we weren't able to fix it. But those are the kind of conversations and ideas I'm hopeful come out of these provider, family, and staff conversations. Is things like that seem so simple, and yet we struggle mightily to pull off.
Yeah. You know what I was wondering, as you're speaking, I just had two little brainstorms. One is there any way to tap into, I know there seems to be a lot happening in the mindfulness and social emotional coming out of the pandemic, mental health assistance that's out there. There's a lot of telehealth, all that kind of support now for people. And I wondered if that we could tap into those areas, because a lot of people are getting trained to be counselors. So people have an interest in helping that effort and maybe tapping into the people who are looking to get into those fields now because they're so needy. Maybe that's where you could find some good staff, because a lot of our individuals, not only do they need the housing, the how to get there and back in the job, but they also need the support with their mental health and with just social emotional learning and behaviors. So maybe, tapping into that area for staffing would be good, because I've found that the staff are often, it's hard to find staff that do that well.
I appreciate
my
that.
second thought is, you were saying about tapping into universities and having people, the technology, like in some cases, maybe it would be easier to have people be on call, like you have the telehealth, and during the pandemic, if you want to talk to your doctor or see your doctor, maybe that's a way, like if there was an emergency, like you said, a lot of times they might not need somebody there all 8 hours of the night, but they might have somebody on call.
So we'll share a video to this group and to all the other groups about the concept of remote supports, which does just that. And Ohio is years ahead of us on this endeavor. While Connecticut leads in a number of areas, we are never shy to steal from states who do it better than us. And we've been following Ohio's blueprint for technology first. we are in the process of identifying remote support providers, but we have some already happening here, and it makes a difference. And I'll be really honest with you. There are sometimes you need a certain level of staff present. Sometimes you need a certain level of staff available, and for some of our individuals, overstaffing is as problematic as understaffing, and finding that right balance where people can feel independent but know they have support when they need it and that it's nearby is really, really important, because that sense of self-worth comes from being, for some people, comes from being as independent as possible. And it is not for everybody we support. It won't work for 17,000 people. But if it works for a few hundred people, it frees up literally hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to address other people's needs if we can deploy it.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, rather than having paying somebody to sleep in the house and be there physically, who in fact might not even be able to help. And versus the other thing is, like, some of the technological help that, they're inventing all these things that'll, lift your bed up or fold your clothing, or like, we don't want that stuff, because those things, like everything in technology, they break, they don't work, we want the access, the remote access, the on-call assistance. Like, you could call your best friend and say, hey, can you come over? I can't get my whatever open. That's what I think would work for people.
Yeah, we have a self-advocate who works for us, who's living her best life, married with her husband in a house that they live in. And if you met them on the street, you would never guess the type of life they live, because you would imagine them living in a group home or with full-time family support. And she's pretty open about her life and how amazing it is and how much better it will get. But those types of stories and the type of independence you're talking about, again, I'm not trying to force, I'm not trying to take away staff. I'm not trying to take away opportunities within the system. I'm trying to see if there's ways that we can use the resources we have to provide as much support to as many people as possible on any given day. When I came to Connecticut 20 years ago, the fight was between the haves and the have-nots. At that time, it was between public services and private services. And the publics were the haves and the privates were the have-nots. 20 years later, it's those on the wait list or those in group homes and those who are not, and they get pitted against each other. And we will never be as successful as we can be if we're all pitted against one another. And this is an opportunity for us to work together as people living a lot of the same life's lessons and lived experiences to try and create better outcomes for everybody.
Yeah.
We're
Commissioner, I think that gets to Jackie, just put a comment in the chat, the push for independence, and it's not for everyone. I think we haven't emphasized, but part of the system transformation is for those who choose to and can benefit from one of these options, that the transformation plan, a piece of that is to take those current settings, those group homes, those CLAs, and ensure that those settings are available, have the nursing supports they need, have the clinical supports they need, so that people that truly do have a need for that level of support have that available to them. That is also part of our system transformation. So we hadn't said that specifically, but I want to make sure that that part of the transformation is part of this discussion as well.
Yeah, some of what, and Jackie, some of the issues that we're looking at outside of ARPA is one of the ARCs has successfully done some trauma-informed care training for their agency that has had marked results for people with more challenging issues in their lives. They're so proud of what they've done. They're looking to bring that to a broader scale to more agencies across the state. And we have to have more information about that soon. It's a commitment, but it relies on best practices, some national expertise out of the Mid-Atlantic area for a woman informed, who's a leader in trauma-informed care, who's created some training for programs. Likewise, we were talking about I mentioned public a minute ago, and our public regional director, Patricia West, I'm not sure if she's still on the call, but was on the call. We within the department treat public like a provider, like we would any of the private entities. They picked up the gauntlet when challenged with this opportunity to transform, and have put forward a public transformation plan where they can really become the backstop for areas where providers are struggling, for when we have families who have loved ones who are stuck in places, whether it's an emergency room, in a home, at some other facility where they're not doing well. And they've come up with a full menu of supports and services because of some of the infrastructure we have in place, and because of some of the latitude I have as commissioner to demand certain things from my staff that private providers couldn't from theirs. And we are really looking forward to rolling that out, not to compete with our private sector partners, but to continue that continuum of supports and to give them resources and outlets that can help benefit that population, and in particular, those challenging individuals. In the midst of the pandemic, or right at the outset of the pandemic, we stood up what we call a step-down unit, a very small program, but very clinically acute. People coming either headed towards the ER or coming out of the ER who need stabilization. We've had a very successful run on a 5 to 6 bed unit at our Hartford Regional Center. And the staff committed to that program are so excited about it, they want to double capacity. Additionally, modeled after that, we stood up a children's program like that's been launched in the middle of the state as well. So while a lot of this discussion tonight may have seemed geared towards people with lower level of needs, fixing a problem for anybody in our system creates opportunity for everybody in our system. I'll say it again. Fixing a problem for any one person in our system creates opportunity for everybody in our system. When we're more efficient with our resources anywhere within the system, there's more resources for people who feel like they're left out. And I promise you, that's the intent here. We're not looking at saving money. We're not looking at reducing our budgets. We're looking at providing as many supports to as many people, regardless of their level of need, as we can. Listen, we're up against time. I'm going to leave you with the same thoughts and message. And I get you're tired. I promise you, I get you're tired. I live it. But we have a rare opportunity, a once in a lifetime opportunity tonight. So if it's not now, I ask you when, and if it's not us together, I ask you who. I'm really looking forward to these continued conversations. I look forward to partnering with you all. I hope you'll attend further conversations, and listen, I appreciate you all, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the stuff that doesn't sound so good about DDS and the stuff that sounds a little better. We need to hear all that feedback. Thank you for tonight, and I look forward to seeing you all very soon. Appreciate you all.